Hmm. Oh, no. Oh, I do have someone in the question and answer saying, is your volume on?
Yes. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We are so excited to have everybody here today for our third installment of Talk It Out Tuesday. My name is Kimberly Newman. I'm the Programs Director for the SBA Capital Women's Business Center here at Wacif. And we hold this session every other Tuesday to talk with other Wacif thought leaders as we delve deeply into all of the amazing services that they offer and all of the wonderful things that they can do to help support your business. Today, we have the comparable Renaissance man, I say the master of all, Russell Shair. He is our Education and Advisory Services Manager here at Wacif. I also kind of affectionately say, I think he has one of the bricks in the building somewhere because he is an institution. He's a part of the institution here. Russell, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about your amazing background and what you do here at Wacif.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, this afternoon on Talk It Out Tuesdays, Kim. Absolutely excited about the conversation for today. But to jump into it, my professional experience actually started once I graduated from college. I actually went into the Peace Corps, and I was actually working overseas for a number of years. And interesting enough, it was in um, almost in education and teaching. So I've kind of made a full circle, so to speak, and I'll kind of document that journey here just shortly. But I was working in post-apartheid Southern Africa right out of college and did a lot of education teacher training with some of the entities in Southern Africa, directly with Namibia, and then some other external work working with entities in South Africa and Zambia and other parts of the southern part of the continent and diaspora. So that was sort of my introduction into education, even though my background in terms of my undergrad degree is in architecture. But I decided to do a little bit of exploration before I jumped deep into that. After working in Southern Africa around education and teacher training, came back and started working in marketing and recruitment for some time. And this is literally right around the early 2000s when social media was kind of getting ready to kick things off. And me just kind of being an early adopter across the board in so many different ways, I kind of saw the trend coming and decided to jump headlong into it and actually kind of quit my job at the time and started my own marketing and strategy agency. And so for about 10 years, I was actually working once again in digital and social media strategy, in which I served a number of different businesses from startups right on to Fortune 500 and 100 organizations. One of the most interesting projects I had, actually, I was working with Japan's second largest telecommunications company, in which they're actually, this is about 2011, 2012, when this project actually was taking place. And it's kind of like before artificial intelligence AI was actually AI. And so back in 2010, we was working with a Japanese company, and they had an outpost in Silicon Valley. And we were helping them with some stuff called sentiment analysis and almost social media monitoring before, it was kind of a big thing. And so, like I said, for well over a decade, just in my personal background, I've been working with AI in terms of how that kind of bleed into some of the stuff I'm doing here at Wacif. But that was one of my more interesting and actually exciting projects. The work was just fantastic, and I really enjoyed that project. And then about in 2015 or 2016, I decided to say, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to get my MBA. And went and got my MBA from George Washington University. Had a fantastic experience then. And then kind of the opportunity with Wacif kind of fell out of the sky in a lot of ways. There was a colleague of mine that I had met years ago at a dinner party. And we kind of just connected in terms of professional work and kind of our personal aspirations around business and things of that nature. And so we have kind of connected. And then a number of years later, and we hadn't talked, we kind of, you know, people meet and kind of people go their separate ways. And she actually posted a job for Wacif online. And I just happened to be perusing through and kind of saw it. I think it was on Facebook. I can't remember if it was Facebook or LinkedIn, but one of those two. And I kind of saw the job description organization and said, oh, wow, this is kind of very similar to what I did. And I said, I'll pursue it. Didn't really think anything about it. And then they offered me an interview, and then they offered me the job. And I said, hey, you know what, this is fantastic work. And that was in 2020. So that's kind of a brief synopsis in terms of my journey. There's a whole bunch of things I didn't include, but those are some of the highlights in terms of where I started, kind of the work I was involved in, kind of how that landed here in Wacif, and kind of sort of sets the stage for the kind of work I do here at Wacif, which kind of really talks to the idea of how do we provide support, resources, and just know-how for the entrepreneurs that we work with. And a lot of that, the foundation is around the 10 years of running my own business, which I did marketing and strategy. A lot of that being flavored, obviously, with social media, because that's just been sort of the juggernaut, obviously, that's been eating up the marketplace for the last 15 to 20 years. And so that's kind of really been my orientation and sort of been my space of expertise is as social and digital has really kind of eaten up, so to speak, the atmosphere in terms of business. You know, what does that mean for the changing idea of value? What does that mean for the changing idea of strategy? And what does that mean overall in terms of how do we understand this new idea of social and digital? And how does that impact the business landscape as we know it? So yeah, I've been involved in digital for a long time. I don't do that specifically with Wacif at the particular moment, but a lot of it is infused in terms of the undercurrents I think about, like how do we deal with strategic partnerships? What is some of the expertise that we know that we need to tap into in terms of our partners and our collaborators? So all those things are very, very much oriented with. And like I said, the first opportunity we had to jump back into AI, because I think now more so than even 10 years ago, it's gotten to a place where everybody's able to take advantage of that. We were kind of an early adopter in terms of, might even say CDFIs in general, providing some robust training around artificial intelligence. And my colleague and I, Jessica Randolph, kind of jumped into the fray and said, hey, Wacif definitely needs a platform in which we can provide digital and marketing strategy and opportunities for businesses. And we kind of came up with this idea called a Creative Academy for Entrepreneurs. And as a result of sort of putting that together, we infused in that a lot of AI training along with other digital and marketing opportunities as well. So that kind of, I think, kind of gives a little quick high level view in terms of where I'm at, the kind of work I've been involved in, how that translates in terms of some of the work that I'm doing here at Wacif.
Yeah, I think that really sets the foundation for our conversation today. We're going to delve more deeply into Creators Academy later on in this call. But just to kind of step back for a second, one of the most phenomenal parts of Wacif is that they intentionally incorporate in their staff and in their foundation resources with the entrepreneur community. You yourself, entrepreneurship being not just a lifestyle, but a mindset. Listening to your background, it sounds like you started out with that entrepreneur mindset. You were ready to go the non-traditional route in some way, shape, or form, even after leaving college. So, you know, it's definitely a blessing to have you in this ecosystem to be able to bring that not only experience, but mindset with you when you're working with these entrepreneurs in our client base. So saying that to be said, as we move into the open chat portion, I know that there are sometimes some of our failures as well as our wins have taught us some of the best lessons about strategies or approaches to business. What sort of strategies do you recommend that can help these businesses really think about growth and expanding their businesses?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's always those questions is like, what do you recommend for me as a business owner, or what do you recommend for CEOs of organizations or small businesses, or what have you? And it's always part of the response in the back of my head as well. It depends. Like, well, let's talk about what kind of business you have, what industry are you in terms of business life cycle, where are you at? Have you been operating for 5 years, or are you just right after startup stage, or you have sort of a more mature seasoned business? You might have 10 or 12 employees, or maybe even 500 employees. And so what does strategy look like in terms of from growth? But I think across the board, in general, what always makes sense in terms of where should that conversation start is really having a pretty good and thorough understanding about where your business is currently, right? Regardless of, once again, where you are in the business life cycle, having a pretty good in-depth understanding about the weaknesses of your business, the strengths of your businesses, what the business looks like in terms of opportunities, and where can you move to sort of take that business to the next level, whatever that next level might mean, right? And so there's a tried and true model called the SWOT analysis. I mean, a lot of folks are probably familiar with that: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And there's so many other tools and platforms you can use for business assessment to kind of get a sense of where your business is and where you're trying to go. And, there's a number of different tools that can do that. But I would always recommend, just right off the bat, when you have been thinking about it, go through a process. You can do that with a business mentor, if you hire a consultant or advisory team, or whomever, whatever resources you have to sort of go through that process. Have a really pretty comprehensive and thorough understanding about where your business is. And then based off of, what are the aspirations in terms of where you're trying to go, you can pick your time horizon. Is that a year from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now? And that depends on a number of different factors. But regardless, I've always been like, okay, where do I want to go? Okay, I might want to go place A, place B, place C. In order to get there, okay, where am I at right now? Right, and have a pretty good understanding of that. And then once I have a pretty decent evaluation, then I can sort of put in place some steps, resources, opportunities, if that's what it is that you're looking at, that I can put in on the plate, that I can then begin to sort of look at and eat from, that gets me to the next stage. So making it pretty simple, I would say, like, figure out a way to understand where your business is, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and then that can help, I think, in a lot of ways, make some smart determinations in terms of what are your next steps after that.
I think that is a very, very, and I'm just going to stop right there for a second. I think that's a very important detail. So thank you for highlighting that, because one of the portions of the SWOT analysis is where I find the most challenge is also in the gap analysis. So as we are identifying those strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, we also have to be transparent and authentic in our journey, not necessarily with external people, but with ourselves, about what really are our strengths, what really are our weaknesses and opportunities and threats. And then when it presents those gaps, being okay with identifying them, because that allows you to come up with the solutions to overcome it. So I think, especially for the Women's Business Center, we have a lot of people who are in the vision or concept phase of their business, meaning they are putting together all of those thoughts and formulating the idea or approach into entering entrepreneurship. And that's where those SWOT and gap competitive analysis reports are essential, because that's where you're identifying not just the how to enter the business, but what your trajectory could possibly be within that business.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when folks ask, I think earlier I was mentioning, where are you in the business life cycle? That becomes also important, because in terms of when you're setting a strategy, if if you're a seasoned business owner or a seasoned entity and you've been operating for, let's say 10 years to 15 years as an example, like, okay, where do we want to be in 3 years? That's a different conversation than, I have an idea. I'm running some MVPs, so to speak. You know, if we look at the business model canvas, MVP is a minimum viable product. I have an idea. You know, I've sold a couple of. I'm just going to grab socks as an example. I've sold a couple of socks. You know, folks kind of seem to like that. Okay, where do I want to be a year from now? That's a different conversation than if you're a business owner than having a business for 5 or 10 years. Like, where do I want to be a year from now? So once again, depending on where you are in the business life cycle, really kind of determines, okay, how do I think about where I want to go a year or 2 or 3 from now from a strategic lens? If I'm a startup or startup phase versus I'm a seasoned or experienced business owner and or business, a much more mature business. And where do I want to go? Where should I go? Where does it make sense to go based off of, once again, how long I've been operating? So those two conversations look very different. And then to add to the mix, if you have a smaller team, right? If you have a team of 3 or 4 or 5 versus having a team of, over 100, there's different consideration in terms of, okay, where do we invest resources? Do we want to build up the team in terms of bringing on, we have a strong marketing entity and maybe some degree HR, but we really, really need a strong operations and maybe need to hire for that. But if you're a much more seasoned business, you're like, maybe we need to look at upskilling, right? We don't need to hire anybody. We just need to actually send some of the team members off to do some executive or managerial training because, there's things are happening in the marketplace and, hiring isn't necessarily what we need to do. We got some strong foundational team members. They just need some upskilling. So once again, in those two scenarios, they're radically different things. If you're trying to hire to grow the team because you're trying to, enter different markets, or you're trying to deepen your relationships with an existing customer base or maybe a new customer base, versus you have a pretty steady presence in a particular market and it's been working for you well for the past 5 or 10 years or whatever the time frame may be, and you're just trying to maybe deepen relationships or add additional value by expanding a level or two, so to speak, in terms of what you're already delivering. So once again, I've had experiences on both of those and a lot of in between. So when it comes to determining, okay, where do we go, that conversation is going to look different if you're a startup or early stage businesses versus much more mature business. So once again, depending on where you are in that spectrum, is really going to determine what's the outlook, what's the recommendation, what's the type of program we're going to put together in terms of, okay, we need to go from A to B. How do we begin to sort of set the stage for that?
Yeah. And speaking of independent variables, I mean, you said it yourself, you arrived here in 2020. While we would love to say that something like a COVID, it's an anomaly, it happened and we got past it, but we all know the cyclical nature of life, right? We will revisit something similar again, where it is completely disruptive to markets and to business. And, how did that look for you to come in and work with these businesses in different capacities that were in their own variation of change?
Yeah. When I started here in 2020, the pandemic wasn't anything, not at least from the Wacif lens, even my lens as an organization, like we were planning for that. Obviously, many, if not lots and lots, if not all people, no one was really planning to sort of having to navigate through a pandemic. So going back to, it's almost like you use sports as a, sort of as an analogy or sort of a playground to sort of how you think about things. It's like fundamentals, right? Fundamentals are the things that allow you to kind of really maneuver through changing situations. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, a fundamental component of business growth and development is your assessment. So if a pandemic, as an example, we're talking about that, COVID hits and it's something we didn't like, okay, whoa, okay, something is happening. It's impacting the market. It's impacting my business. It's impacting me personally. It's impacting whomever your community is, your stakeholders. All right, okay, we need to assess what's happening right now, right? And so that's where you go into fact gathering. Right now, I'm seeing that the mayor or someone is telling businesses need to shut down. Okay, got it. I got that piece of data. I know that people are no longer leaving their houses, and so people come to my restaurant. So now I'm assessing, okay, now there's no longer people leaving their houses to come to my business. So you have to go into this fact-finding assessment. And as fast as humanly possible, you kind of have to go through that exercise. So once you've kind of assessed the situation, now you're like, okay, how do you sort of respond to that, obviously in real time? And that becomes a challenge in of itself, which is a whole other conversation. But once again, when I came here in 2020, I was here for all of 2 months, and then the pandemic hit like around March. We kind of went right into sort of go mode. And part of that go mode was like reach out to our clients, assess where they are. Hey, how are you feeling? What's going on? Do you need help based off of what's been taking place so far? How can we help? And those are all assessment sort of approaches. And so once again, I think periodically, however, however that looks, I think businesses should build into sort of their own monitoring process. It's like, okay, let's assess where we are. Are we better off today than we were 6 months ago? Are we better off a year now than we were a year ago? And if we are, great, let's continue doing what we're doing. And if we're not, where do we need to sort of tinker with the model or tinker with sort of the roadmap we put together? And how do we sort of adjust either, maybe the centrality of that, or do we adjust around the edges in terms of what that looks like? But I think that one of the best orientations and dispositions for any business owner or CEO or manager or whomever is like, okay, let's periodically assess where we are, what we have done over the past X amount of time. Has that been good, bad, okay, average, fantastic, terrible? And then based off of that, that helps to determine, okay, what do we do? How much do we tinker with the model? How much do we tinker with what we're doing going forward? 6 months, 2 months, it could be the next week, or the next month, whatever that time frame is. But I think constant assessment, evaluation, and creating some tool to kind of allow you to go through that process as quickly as possible, but as effectively as you can, once again becomes very valuable. And that's, like I said, with the sports, dribbling, rebounding, free throws, if you can do those well, then you can kind of figure out how do we sort of build around that to make ourselves much more efficient and much more effective.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the response from many organizations, including Wacif, was just nothing short of amazing. And Wacif thankfully has some awesome partnerships. Our ecosystem is strong, and being able to, in times of need and beyond, support those businesses as they are dealing with those changes and other changes that may present themselves during the entrepreneur journey. Being such an integral part of this organization, what resources do you recommend, entrepreneurs newly coming in, which is a new space for Wacif, as well as those that are looking to talk about funding opportunities? How do they navigate the conversation to resources within our infrastructure?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that is always challenging for folks and it's depending on who you are and how you're designed, like networking just becomes like, oh my God, I don't want to network. I hate just going up and trying to tell my story and all these different types of things. And so, that's a way. And networking isn't necessary because some people are very uncomfortable selling themselves for various reasons. I understand that, or they just don't like going out and exerting the energy to show up and just talk, which I completely and totally understand. But and that can look different ways, right? And so I would always recommend go out and simply find out ways to aggregate and collect information about resources that are available to you, right? And a low-hanging fruit way of thinking about that is networking. But it could just simply be, hey, I'm gonna go out with some friends and we're just gonna go to an event, and just don't put any pressure on yourself. I'm just gonna casually ask some conversations. Hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you recommend, or what are your thoughts? And sometimes when people want to network, they want to go out like, I'm trying to go out and accomplish this. I'm going to go out and conquer that, and it can be a lot of anxiety around that, right? So how do you create sort of within yourself a very easy way to think about and approach that, which doesn't become overwhelming? Because if it becomes overwhelming, you just don't want to do it, and it becomes a chore, and then you're not trying to you're not able to accomplish, the goals that you're setting forth. So, think of an easy way to go out and how do I collect information and how do I get resources? And now I think a way which becomes very easy for folks is so many things are happening virtually, right? I mean, you have conferences and workshops and things that take place online, and people are just sharing their resources right now, right? So if someone signed up for this particular talk, they don't have to talk to anybody. They don't have to network. They can say, oh, wait a minute, he said this, let me write that down. And in a way
No,
that's
but then we
comfortable.
have to look at ourselves the whole time. That
Yeah,
part of
no, yeah,
anxiety as well, right?
absolutely. And so, but there's all these different ways that folks can quote unquote network. And I'd rather say a way to go out and gather resources to kind of help you move through your journey, and that could be information on, is there a certification that I need? Is there a type of training that I need to be aware of? Is there a type of event that I should be at because they're hiring, they're a place, this is where contracts are being put together, or this is a place where people are hiring, if people are looking to, as it pertains to getting jobs and work opportunities. So once there's all these different modes and different realms that folks can go out and get information that really provides that fundamental component I talked about earlier. What are the brass tacks in terms of building your business or starting your business? Is having, as much resources available to you as possible. And those resources can pan out solutions in a number of different ways. Like, if someone's not familiar from a legal aspect, what do I need to do to start my LLC? I'm not sure how to do that. Then there's a resource to figure that out. DCRA obviously is a place to go for that, but who's the person to talk to and what information do I need to submit? All these different types of things. So just showing up in places where you can have the resources available to make a decision to do A, B, or C, whether that's getting licensing, getting certification. Do you need to hire a consultant to help you think about your business from a strategic perspective? Or you're very clear, and you're like, I need to hire an HR person. They could be either a consultant or a contractor or a full-time employee. So how do I go about doing that? And having resources to help you walk you through that decision-making process, that becomes, once again, a resource that becomes very useful to you. So just finding out ways that what we provide is we just provide at a minimum a lot of resources available to our clients, because every day they're trying to make decisions to go up or down, left or right. And as often is the case, they need support and help with that. Going back to the basketball reference, if I'm trying to figure out how to become a better shooter, I need a shooting coach, or I need maybe some conditioning to sort of do that. So the resources to figure out how to do that becomes very valuable to you.
Well, I definitely want to get a minute or two talking about resources and talking about networking and being a part of your peer-to-peer groups. Wacif and yourself have been so thoughtful and intentional about creating opportunities for the entrepreneurs to do just that. Ascend and Creators Academy. Can you give us a quick snapshot of that before we depart today?
Yeah, sure. There's a number of different resources and programs and opportunities that we provide for the entrepreneurs that we come in contact with. One of those is Ascend, which is basically our cohort-based program. We usually accept into it about 15 entrepreneurs. And in those cohort programs, there's an opportunity for them to, once again, as we talked about earlier, acquire those resources, that know-how, those insights, the expertise to be able to move their business forward. And in that cohort, we do leadership training, resilience training, operations and management training, financing, things of that nature. But once again, through that cohort program, we provide spaces for those entrepreneurs to think about, how do I want to build my business? How do I want to continue developing it? And what does that look like? And so in those spaces, there's opportunities for them to learn from their cohort members, their peers. We can support and we can provide expertise, but we're not the single silver bullet on everything and everything out there around business. We become a resource. So their cohort members become a resource for that as well. But it's an environment which they can learn and can have support and build a community of folks that can help them, get through the day-to-day sort of trials and tribulations, and the week-to-week trials and tribulations, and the month-to-month trials and tribulations. So the cohort program, our Ascend, is an opportunity to do that. Our Creators Academy for Entrepreneurs, one of our other programs, as a resource. Once again, if folks are trying to figure out what's my digital engagement, what's my digital strategy, what's my digital footprint look like, that becomes another opportunity. We offer a lot of courses from artificial intelligence to branding and marketing. Matter of fact, I'm going to shout out real quick. I don't know if the registration is still open, but we have a program coming up called Digital Refresh that's taking place at the end of the month. And once again, that's an opportunity for businesses who are operating in the digital space, whether that's e-commerce or your social media entity or what have you. How do you think about your digital presence? How do you think about your digital operations? And that's another opportunity in terms of what Wacif is providing to give those insights, experience, and know-how to the entrepreneurs that we serve as well.
That sounds perfect. So we will share information about all of those programs. You can also find them on our website. I believe the springtime, you'll see another healthy round of different offerings. And so we definitely want you to engage. We also have training programs that have been offered to us from our partner Verizon through the EDX that can provide additional information about all of the things that we talked about on this session today. Mr. Shair, you have been amazing. You are a wealth of knowledge. If anyone wants to get in touch with him to talk about their journey, where they are, he can help resource you out. Just find his information again on the website. Dina may be able to link it in the chat. And of course, if you want to be a part of the Women's Business Center, please reach out to us so that we can get you started today. Thank you again for joining us. And this will be on demand. So if you missed any part of it, please don't hesitate to look at it on the web. Thank you guys for joining.
Thanks, Kim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.